Reverse by Black K Cat. Chapter 10. Nepathe. If there's one thing Kurama hates above all others, it's helplessness. It's having his will stolen and twisted and having another's will forced on him. Madara did it twice, Kaguya tried it, Obito managed it. That would be the reason for his loathing of the Sharingan, because he fears it. He fears it more than anything, that a single moment of eye contact can strip away everything that makes him Kurama and turn him into a mindless weapon. If you do this, he hisses, I'll rip you apart and eat your corpses, you fucking bastards. At the edge of his line of vision, Kakashi shifts. You won't, he says flatly, and at the same moment, Shisui's chakra crests. Kurama tries to look away, slam his eyes shut, but he already knows it's too late. He can feel himself falling. There's a sharp a puff of smoke, and something small and white drops out of midair to land right on Shisui's head. He yelps, leaping back, and three fluffy tails swing down to slap him in the face. Another cry, and he lashes out, swooping a kunai over his head, but the creature leaps clear with a neat flip, bounces off Itachi's face as he heads for his clansman, and sends him reeling and landing lightly on the ground. Which one? It shouts, darting around the Uchihas' attempts to grab it, and there's definitely a female voice. Which one is it? From the bushes, there's a sharp, eerie screech, and a small scarlet shape bursts out and bolts across the battleground. It slams bodily into Kakashi's leg even as he tries to dodge, and sharp white teeth flash. Kakashi yelps in pain and overbalances, and the little red fox abandons its victim to throw itself at Kurama. It grabs a vine in its teeth and wrenches hard, but Kurama sees movement and shouts a warning as more roots sprout. Smoke whirls, chakra flares, and the white Vixen disappears. In her place is a girl who looks no older than 14, with long white hair and three tails peeking from under her red kimono. She claps her hands together, and orbs of multicolored fire whirl into being around her. A flick of her fingers sends them spinning out, aiming for the Konoha shinobi, and in the confusion that follows, she leaps forward, alighting next to Kurama and the red fox. Kyuubi-sama? She asks, already ripping at the roots binding him. What on earth did you do to get yourself trapped in that body? Long story, Kurama says gruffly, but relief leaves him shaky and almost breathless as he helps to free himself. He catches a flash of lightning from the corner of his eye and swears, lunging forward and scooping the Kitsune and Fox both up into his arms as he jumps clear. It impacts behind him, scorching the Mokuton user's trap and leaving a deep crater, but Kakashi doesn't pause, driving forward with the kunai leading. Really, Kurama is getting tired of this. He snarls, boosting the fox up onto his shoulders and tucking the Vixen under his arm like a sack of rice as he strikes. And this time he doesn't hold back. The shockwave tears across the earth, flattening trees and cracking rock, forcing Kakashi to tumble away. In his place, Tenzo tries to lunge forward, but the Vixen makes a sound of triumph and brings her ants together again. There's another pop, and a leaf goes tumbling off her head as she shifts again, flowing out of Kurama's grip like smoke. This time, it's back to a fox, but large, much, much larger than the tiny form she appeared with. As big as a pony, she plants her feet, opens her mouth, and spits a bolt of lightning right at the Jonin! There's no time to see the result. Kurama spins, catching the hilt of the Tanto descending at his skull, and snarls at the Uchiha who tried to take his will. He slams a foot towards the boy's gut, but the blow doesn't land. There's a faint shimmer, a flicker of speed that's almost too much for even Kurama to follow, and he has to knock the red fox clear, then throw himself forward and down into a roll to avoid the blade aimed at his back. He twists back to his feet just in time for a kick to knock his legs out from under him again, and he snarls as Itachi strikes out at him, shoving on bright with power. Kurama summons fire in a wave and forces the boy to dodge it. Staggering upright, Kurama locks eyes with Kakashi, who's approaching at a run. He bares his teeth, brings his claws up, and ignores the red fox when it claws its way back up to his shoulders and curls defensively around his neck. Why? Kurama demands. Why all of this? Naruto doesn't even know you! You've never been there for him before! Kakashi's poker face is too good to tell if the barb landed, but he slows, circling Kurama wearily. That's not what this is about, he says. Naruto belongs in Konoha. You have no right to take him away. I have every right! Kurama snarls. You bastard! I know who trained you! Naruto might as well be family to you, but he doesn't so much as know your name. Justify that! Kurama is used to anger, hate. They've been his companions as long as he can remember, and he knows all too well how to use them! He grabs for them now, for power, for balance, positive and negative chakra spin at his fingertips, condensing down into 5 marble-sized balls of purple-black light, and Kurama lets them go. They whirl out, and Kakashi's eyes widen. He shouts a warning, throwing himself back towards the river, but Kurama can't see if he makes it. When the Bijudama impact, it shakes the very earth and fills the battleground with choking smoke. Okay, up there, Kurama asks, putting a hand up to touch his passenger, and the small fox yips quietly. A moment later, the smoke parts and a shining white shape slips through. The Vixen bounds over to them, then drops into a crouch. Get on, Kyubi-sama, she orders. I cast a few illusions, but it won't distract them for long. Kurama doesn't hesitate to vault onto her back, twisting his fingers into her long ruff as she leaps forward, long legs eating up the ground as she races into the forest. Naruto, he manages, and when the red fox's claws scrape at his neck, he pulls the creature down into his lap. I have to get back to Naruto. He's alone. I'll take you to him, the Vixen promises, pausing in a small dip. Which way? The red fox barks, scrambling off her back, and races up the hill. Kurama glances around and is startled to recognize it as the same spot where he helped the fox earlier. He slips off the Vixen's back as well, touching her shoulder in gratitude. Here, he says, Thank you. You saved me. Ochan? A voice calls, and Kurama spins, instantly sidetracked. Naruto! He shouts back, and a small body bursts out of the bushes and slams into him. Kurama lets out a breath of pure relief and wraps his arms around the boy, clutching him close. Naruto, you're okay. Fine, Naruto says and looks up. His eyes catch on the white Vixen and go wide with wonder. Ochan, what is that? Wait, don't you mean her? The Vixen protests, and the red fox bolts back under her paws with a yipping laugh. Kurama laughs as well, too shaky and glad to do much else. Thank you, he tells her again, lifting Naruto into his arms. I don't know how to repay you. Then he crouches down, holding out a hand to the red fox, and adds with a smile, and thank you as well. That was very, very clever and tricky of you. I bet you'll be earning that second tail in no time. The fox gives a rumbling purr and twists under his hand like a cat, then licks his fingers and slips away, vanishing back into the undergrowth. He wanted to repay you, the Vixen says, a smile in her voice as she crouches beside him. And when he told me the greatest of our kind was nearby, I had to see for myself. Not what you expected, huh? Kurama asks wryly, rising to his feet again. Thank you for the help, but I should go. Those 4 won't be distracted for long. The Vixen snorts softly. Don't be a fool, she says, tone arch. I could take you anywhere you want to go, Kyubi-sama, and do it much faster than that silly human body. This is true. Kurama hesitates, but he doesn't really have any other choices. With Konoha's best tracker on his tail, his options are shrinking by the second. Casting a glance at Naruto, he arches a brow and asks, Up for it, kid. Naruto looks odd. We're gonna ride a fox? He demands and beams widely. Yeah! With a laugh, the Vixen turns to present her back. All right, then. Glad to have your approval, Kit. Where to, Kyubi-sama? Call me Kurama. Kurama offers, setting himself behind her shoulders with Naruto in front of him. You're likely to give someone a heart attack otherwise. And I was headed for Suna. That gets him another laugh, wicked and tricky, as she rises to her full height. I'm Fuji, she offers, and Suna it is. Can we stop for Odin on the way? Ramen! Is Naruto's input. Can we get ramen too, Ochan? Kurama chuckles, kisses some bright hair, and answers, Yeah, meal's on me. Thanks, Fuji. White ears flick back, then up, and the Vixen leaps forward into a run, all sleek muscle and inhuman speed. I've always wanted to meet you, Kurama-sama, she calls back, so believe me, the honor is mine. Kurama wonders a little wryly how to tell her that she's more or less met 2 of him in the space of a few minutes, but decides to save that conversation for a later date. I have this nagging suspicion that didn't go anywhere close to how we planned it, Shisui says as he fights his way free of Tenzo's desperately erected shield because he's a sarcastic asshole who thinks he's funny. Someone hits it for me. A might go to Tenzo requests, dragging himself out of the river's shallows, which a very clever genjutsu made him think was solid ground. I might get please. Obligingly, Itachi reaches out and smacks the back of his best friend's head. Shisui yelps and ducks away looking wounded and protests, "Hey, easy! You didn't have 20 pounds of wax just land on your skull!" Itachi, who has 4 muddy pop prints smeared across his face, narrows his eyes and glares. "Technically not your skull," Shisui reminds him, grinning. For all their sakes, Kakashi sweeps his feet out from under him and dumps the elder Uchiha on his butt. Given Shisui's speed and reflexes, it's likely that he allows it to happen, but either way, it's still vaguely satisfying. Turning his attention away, Kakashi looks over his dirty, slightly battered team and resists the urge to sigh. The riverbank around them is a complete disaster, more of a collection of craters than anything, and the dust and smoke in the air is only just now clearing. "All right?" he asks Tenzo, who took the brunt of the attack while shielding the rest of them. Tenzo nods agreeably, in the process of wringing out his flak jacket. "Marvelous, thank you for asking, senpai." Something that may or may not be a small fish flaps out of a bucket and falls to the ground, and he gives Kakashi a pointed smile and chucks it back into the river. Really, Kakashi is surrounded by comedians. To be honest, though, he isn't feeling all that enthusiastic himself. Given that his one-on-one fight against Kurama ended with the Uzumaki taking a Reikiri to the chest, he'd expected a 4-on-1 fight to go a little more smoothly, or at least not disastrously. Tenzo, Shisui, and Itachi are all Anbu after all, and the 4 of them are fairly well versed in working as a team. They should have been able to overwhelm Kurama easily, but Naruto doesn't even know you! You've never been there for him before! It is maybe just slightly possible that Kurama's words affected him rather more than he would care to admit. The problem, Kakashi thinks, is Kurama's certainty. He is so utterly convinced that Naruto is better off with him, and Kakashi has been on Naruto's guard enough to know just what the boy's life is like. There's always the possibility that if Kurama really is telling the truth about who he is, Naruto really is better off elsewhere. It doesn't matter, Kakashi tells himself. This is a mission from the Saindame Hokage. This is his duty. Naruto belongs in Konoha, in Minato's village, and not in the clutches of a completely unknown man who clearly knows far too much about Jinchuriki. He could be planning to use Naruto as a weapon, or to brainwash him, or just to hurt him. And that's not a risk Kakashi can take. It doesn't matter, he tells himself, and tries to believe it. Uzumaki seemed oddly wary of your Mokuton, Itachi says to Tenzo, startling Kakashi out of his thoughts. When he glances over, the boy offers a small shrug. He went out of his way to avoid Tenzo and keep him at a distance. I thought it was interesting. That's true, and Kakashi had hardly noticed. There's a brief pause as they all consider this, and then Shisui hums thoughtfully, stretching his legs out in front of him and wrapping an arm around his knees. Are we sure, he asks carefully, that all the other Jinchuriki are accounted for? Kakashi lets that rather awful thought sink in for a moment and grimaces. They're really not. Jinchuriki are weapons after all. Villages don't tend to announce when they acquire them, and they're always jealously guarded. Iwa has more than one. Konoha suspects that Kumo does as well, and Suna has admitted to having the Ichibi, but beyond that, it's anyone's guess. Uzushio never had a Biju though, he points out, crouching down beside Shisui. Kurama is gaining a lead, but he's barefoot, tired, and cold, still recovering from Kakashi's Reikiri, with a 6-year-old who can't move nearly as fast. Kakashi is confident they can make up the distance. Suna might have only told us because they had to, but Uzushio was an ally. They wouldn't have lied. Tenzo huffs softly, always so sure that this man was telling the truth. He counters, he could be anyone. Nothing guarantees that he's really an Uzumaki. He wasn't lying. In faint surprise, Kakashi glances over at Itachi. The 11-year-old meets his stare evenly, tipping one shoulder in a faint shrug, but says nothing else. Itachi? Shisui prompts, looking curious as well, and his cousin glances at him for a second before nodding in agreement. When he spoke of family, he wasn't lying, Itachi clarifies. He was angry, but there were no micro-expressions indicating falsehood. As far as Kurama believed, he was telling the truth. Naruto really is his family. Tenzo sighs faintly, but doesn't argue that the Sharingan's ability to pick up on such things. Then he is an Uzumaki, he concludes, which brings us back to whether or not he's a Jinchuriki. I think we can safely assume he is, Kakashi says slowly, remembering Kurama's words about teaching Naruto to use the strength of a Biju, and how they could never understand a Jinchuriki as well as he could. Those abilities of his have to come from somewhere. Given his looks, maybe he's one of Kumo's Jinchuriki gone rogue. It would explain some things, and they'd hardly broadcast losing one of their tailed beasts.
It makes more sense than Kakashi would like it to.
And Uzumaki Man, the father of Konoha's second Jinchuriki, but with no real ties to either Konoha or Uzushio, would be a valuable commodity in Kumo. If Kurama had escaped, made his way back to Uzushio before it fell, it would also make sense for him not to have told anyone what he was. It's a lot of speculation, but the pieces are adding up. You mean we're gonna have to fight a damn Jinchuriki? Shisui demands, sounding distinctly unhappy. Fuck me. We already have. Itachi reminds him at the same moment as Tenzo answers, no, even if you fight me. There's a moment of silence as the three team members stare at each other. Kakashi puts his head in his hands and regrets every single one of his life choices with even more fervor than normal. I was referring to the fight we just finished, Itachi says carefully, ignoring the crimson spreading across his cheeks as he pointedly looks away. Tenzo snorts out a soft laugh, rising to his feet and shrugging on his saggy flak jacket. Well, I was referring to screwing Shisui, he clarifies helpfully. That's fine, everyone knows you're hung up on the captain anyway. Shisui shoots back, and really Kakashi would like to be anywhere else at the moment. Always going, senpai, I'm embarrassed for you, Tenzo. Technically, the expression Tenzo offers him is a smile, but it's weird and darkly creepy and makes even Itachi wince faintly. I've decided. You can sleep outside when we stop for the night. What? Come on, Tenzo! Which we haven't yet. Kakashi cuts in, relieved to have found a place to end this conversation. Get up and let's get moving. Uzumaki can't be too far ahead, and I want him caught as soon as possible. Of course, because everyone in this squad was handpicked to test his patience. That's not the end of things. Still, Shisui and Tenzo have long since found just what volume they can bicker at without giving themselves away. And it's low enough that Kakashi can pretend not to hear as he takes the lead. Surprisingly, Itachi falls into step with him as he scouts the edges of the trees. There's a precise sort of blankness to his face, and his voice is tightly quiet as he asks, "Are we going to kill Uzumaki?" Kakashi pauses, glancing up at the boy. He doesn't say anything, but the faint lift of one brow is enough to make Itachi look away again. Doing anything for family? I think I can understand it, he explains, picking each word with care. And Naruto is my brother's age, and if we do have to... He doesn't have to say that losing the very first person to claim family ties to him, especially in a violent, gruesome way, will scar Naruto for life, maybe even start a seed of resentment against the village rooting in his heart. But he knows he doesn't need to. Kakashi has had all these thoughts already, and they twist themselves up in knots in his brain every time he tries to push them away. Taking a breath, Kakashi says quietly, carefully, I would prefer not to, but the Hokage's orders are clear. If Shisui can manage to use his Koto Amatsu Kami, we'll have no trouble, but I don't think Kurama will come quietly otherwise. That's another thing he doesn't want to think of, the expression on Kurama's face when Shisui got his gaze. It was more than fear at being beaten, because that was terror! Stark and bone deep. But Shisui's Magenkyo isn't well known, especially outside Konoha, so it wasn't that. Some people fear the Sharingan in general, but... that much? It's a piece that doesn't fit. A curiosity. A mystery. Kakashi has never liked mysteries. 12 solid hours from Konoha, on the border where Wen country meets river country. The forest is thin, practically to nothingness, and there are several small villages. More a couple of buildings grouped around the road than actual towns, interspersed with farmland. Fuji, who seems to have a sense for Odin that's equal to Naruto's ramen intuition, carries them right to the edge of one such village before letting them down. It's mid-morning, with several people visible in the distance, but their strange little group hasn't been noticed yet. Probably for the best, Kurama thinks a little wryly, helping Naruto slide to the ground. "Okay, Naruto," he asks, crouching down beside the little boy who's still blinking sleep from his eyes. The cheerful grin he gets in response is so familiar that it aches. "Can we get ramen now, Ochan?" he asks enthusiastically, latching onto Kurama's open hand. Kurama can't help but chuckle, giving the small hand a gentle squeeze. "Sure, kid," he answers, and maybe he never would have called his Naruto that. He always defaulted to brat because that's what Naruto forever was. But here now, it fits. This Naruto is like a fox kit, wide eyes and bright smiles with a trickster's grin hidden beneath, small and cute but with a predilection for mischief. Just seeing him lets the hurt in Kurama's chest scab over, quiets the roiling grief that he's been fighting for days now. "I never get real ramen for breakfast!" Naruto cheers enthusiastically, dragging at Kurama's arm to urge him towards the village. "Let's go! Let's go!" Fuji laughs, bounding after them. She snatches a stray leaf off the ground, tosses it up, and lets it fall to land right on top of her head. As it does, there's a puff of smoke, and a moment later she latches onto Kurama's free hand in her white-haired little girl form. "Odin!" she agrees with equal enthusiasm. "This is one of the best noodle stalls I've ever been to! It's so good!" With a snort, Kurama bids the remaining Ryo he has farewell. Not like he'll ever find something better to spend it on than making Naruto happy, though. Yeah, he huffs, trying to sound grumpy, even though he's smiling. "I can use a meal, too. No more than 10 bowls apiece, though, got it? I'm not made of money here." Naruto's eyes get very, very wide. "Really?" he demands, staring up at Kurama as though he had just handed Naruto the Hokage's hat, no strings attached. "I can have 10? Hokage Gigi only ever lets me get 2! "I'm not your Hokage Gigi," Kurama reminds him. "If you want ramen, we'll get you ramen. Besides, it'll make up for not having dinner last night, right? Eat all you want." Naruto beams. "Thanks, Ochan." He hesitates faintly, but then asks, "Did you really know my mom? What was her name?" The reminder that Naruto knows absolutely nothing about his past, doesn't know his father or mother or anything about his clan, is enough to make Kurama set his jaw and force him to shove down a fiery lash of pure anger. "Yeah," he says when he finally manages to get his temper under control. "I knew her, probably better than anyone else. Her name was Kushina, and she loved ramen just as much as you do. And really, damn the Hokage, damn Kakashi, Uchiha, Mikoto, Nara, Shikako, everyone and anyone who ever knew Minato or Kushina, whoever counted them as a friend. If they had a single decent bone in their bodies, they'd have done something to make Naruto's life less of a hell it had been for the past 6 years. The boy is silent as Fuji pulls them both into the noodle stand and gives the cook their orders. Ramen for Naruto, Kitsune Odin for herself and Kurama. And he's looking down so Kurama can't read his expression. He tries not to worry as he boosts the boy up to sit on a stool, but he can't help it. There's nothing in the world he wants less than to make Naruto sad. But when Naruto finally looks up, he's smiling. Just a little, small and grateful, but it warms Kurama's chest. She did? Just as much? Just as much. Kurama returns and can't resist ruffling the kid's hair again. You've got your mom's temperament to go along with her chakra. She was a lot like you are, even wanted to be Hokage. The light that fills Naruto's face is pure joy, and he laughs, leaning across the gap between their stools and wrapping his arms around Kurama's elbow. Yeah! He says, all determination and enthusiasm. I'm gonna fulfill my mom's dream too! I'm gonna be Hokage for both of us! Kurama debates telling him that his father actually managed to gain the hat, but decides not to just yet. Honestly, Kurama never liked Minato all that much. Probably because the bastard was the one to seal him just when he'd gotten free. but likely also because he had to listen to a spitting teenage girl rambling about Minato's amazing everything for years on end. And Naruto was more like Kushina anyway. She's a better one to focus on. I'm sure she'd be incredibly proud. He tells Naruto, giving the cook an absent wave of thanks as their bowls are set in front of them. She always wanted a strong son, and I know she loves you more than anything. Naruto contemplates this as he empties his bowl, and Kurama leaves him to it, picking apart his average before he eats it. The food settles his empty stomach, and Kurama hadn't realized quite how hungry he was until he finds himself staring at uncovered porcelain. He orders more for all of them, since Fuji is almost done with her oden as well, and is just about to ask Naruto whether he likes his, when the boy suddenly says, I always thought my parents must have been really bad people because everybody hates me and calls me a monster all the time. It takes effort not to let his claws dig gouges into the counter. Kurama takes a slow, careful breath, all too aware of the cook's attention on them as he works and answers sharply, Never believe them, Naruto. Everyone in Konoha is a moron if they can't see just how amazing you are. I will never regret taking you away from them, even if they kill me for it. You deserve to be happy, Kit, and I know someday you'll prove all of them wrong. I've never met anyone less like a monster. Naruto's face screws up like he's about to cry, and he rubs furiously at his eyes. They weren't bad guys? He asks, almost desperately. No, Kurama answers to hesitation, reaching out to pull the boy into his lap. Your mom was a jonin who laughed all the time and liked to play pranks. They called her one of the most beautiful konoichi in the village, and she could make chains of golden chakra to fight with. Your dad was a jonin too, and a genius, even if your mom always beat him with a sword. They both loved Konoha and gave their lives so that you could have a chance of surviving. They loved you, Naruto, and so do I. Naruto leans into the hug desperately, arms tight around Kurama's neck, and Kurama presses his cheek against Naruto's hair, pretending he can't hear the choking sobs against his shoulder. Last time, when Naruto learned about his parents, he'd already made a place and a name for himself. He knew he wasn't a monster, knew just why the villagers had always hated him. But right now, he has none of that certainty, none of the assurance that he's more than the whispers. Only his own determination, and for all that Naruto's will has always been incredible, he's a 6-year-old without a single friend. If Kurama can ease that sorrow, of course he's going to. You really do, Ochan? Naruto asks, sickly. You love me? Kurama smiles and kisses the top of his head. More than anything, he confirms, and nothing will ever change that. I promise. With a smile that all but banishes the tears on his cheeks, Naruto sniffles and gives Kurama one last hug before he slides back to his school. With a smile that all but banishes the tears on his cheeks, Naruto sniffles and gives Kurama one last hug before he slides back to his school. I love you too, Ochan, he says firmly. Can you tell me more about my mom and dad? On the road, Kurama agrees readily. Eat your ramen, Naruto. We've got a ways to go before we reach Suna. Besides, Fuji looks hungry. If you're not careful, she might steal it for herself. Definitely. Fuji chimes in from Kurama's other side, slurping up the last of her noodles. Ramen's not as good as Oden, but I like it anyway. Naruto gapes at her, looking almost horrified. Ramen's the best! He protests. Oden's okay, but ramen! But Kitsune Oden has Abaraj! Fuji counters just as horrified. Nothing's better than Abaraj! Kurama laughs, drops a hand on each of their heads, and lightly shoves them back towards their meals. Shut up, brats, he says, and can't quite hide the fond humor in his tone. Just shut up and eat. Fuji pulls one lower eyelid down and sticks her tongue out at him, and Naruto cries, You're a mean, grumpy old man, Ochan! But they're both grinning too, and Kurama can't help but count it as a win.